Hello, everyone. Welcome to a rainy Monday evening. I see the participant numbers are clicking up, so I'm going to wait a couple of minutes while folks trickle in, and we should be starting in right about 6:05. But glad to see you all here. For the folks just joining us, glad to see you all here this evening. We're going to be waiting another minute or so, just give folks till about 6:05 to come in virtually. I can hear the rain trickling off the window behind me, so I think it's a good night to be inside looking at a webinar. So glad to have you all here. And I did see there was some hands that were raised. We are going to do time for questions. I'm going to go through the agenda, and we have some presentations, and then we'll have a long period towards the end for questions. So not to worry there. Okay, it's 6:05, so I think we can go and get started. Welcome everyone this evening to a informational meeting about Somerville's Networked Geothermal Initiative. My name is Garrett Anderson. I work in the Office of Sustainability and Environment, and I have two colleagues here from the City of Somerville with me, as well as some folks from the engineering team. So maybe Naomi, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Naomi Gross. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist with the Office of Sustainability and the Environment, and I'll pass it over to Shannon.
Hi, everyone. I am the new energy advisor at the City of Somerville. Glad to see so many people here.
So we'll be talking about the energy advisor here soon. And Alex, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and your team?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Garrett. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Nukovich. I'm a senior engineer with the energy team at Buro Happold. We're a large global engineering firm, and we've been working with the city over the last few months to explore the idea of network geothermal within the city. And then I'll hand it over to my colleagues, Miles and Grady.
Hi, my name is Miles Ingraham. I'm a professional engineer and geologist working with the team, starting to roll out some of these larger network geothermal systems. So looking forward to the productive meeting tonight.
Hello, everyone. I'm Grady Haffey. I'm a junior member of the energy team. I studied renewable energy as an undergraduate engineer in college, and also excited for the potential of this project.
Great. So I think we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. And in case I can't remember if I said it already, but just so you know, this meeting is being recorded, and we intend to post the link on our website and share it around. So if you have to leave early or things aren't coming through, there will be an opportunity to take a look at these materials later. So this evening has a few purposes. The first is, I kind of want to set the context for Somerville's overall decarbonization work and its climate forward agenda. We have a climate forward plan I'm going to talk about in a moment. It's very comprehensive, and this network geothermal initiative is in the context of those larger efforts. We also want to talk and educate folks about the concept of networked geothermal. It's been around for a while, frankly, mostly in Europe, but it is coming into the United States in more and more places. And we're very excited to be investigating it as a possibility here. And then we also don't want to just leave this meeting as an educational tool, but really there's a call to action. There's things that folks in Somerville can be doing now to decarbonize. So we do want to talk about that. And we also want to give a chance for people to ask questions about the technology, the study that we're doing, the thinking that's gone into it to date, and kind of what our next steps are. So if we can go on to the agenda on the next slide. This is just a kind of a brief breakdown. I think I'm close to on time here for starting up. So we're going to do a few minutes on Climate Forward and the study. We're going to talk about some things renters and building owners can be doing to decarbonize now. And then Alex and her team are going to go through a presentation about network geothermal and geothermal generally, heat pump technology, and how this all fits in to larger infrastructure. And then we're going to look at some of the study areas for the city itself. And then we'll be talking about where we're going to move next. I do see a hand raised, so we are going to wait after go through the presentation, and then we're going to do Q&A after the Buro Happold folks talk about do their presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for that. And then we'll kind of reconvene at the end, provide some more links, some more information, and send you off on your way. Just one next slide. Yeah. So Zoom logistics. So some folks have seen the raise hand figure. That is, if you kind of hover over the bottom of your screen, you'll see a raise hand button. When it's time to do questions after the presentation, we're going to ask folks to go ahead and raise their hand first. And then we'll prompt you, we'll say your name and prompt you to unmute yourself. And then you can ask your question, and then we'll try to find the right person to direct it to answer it. And we'll do Zoom logistics one more time before we actually do the presentation. But first, we thought we might start off with a poll about who you are here this evening and how you might have heard about this. So my colleague Naomi is going to put that poll up. And if you could just take a minute and go ahead and vote, we'll get to be able to see kind of what the results are. And this is my favorite part about Zoom. You get to see the results coming in real time. It's kind of fun. So this will help us a little bit to understand about people's level of knowledge already about network geothermal and help us hopefully guide our presentations going forward. So I think seems like we got most folks responding. I think we're almost there. It looks like the newsletter far and away is where folks heard about it. And Naomi, am I right that the results are up now at this point?
Yes,
or?
everyone
Okay,
should be able
great.
to see them.
Great. So yeah, so first question, it looks like everyone, you're also signing up for the Sustainaville newsletter, which will make Naomi in particular very happy. She drafts it every month. And also our social media as well. So that's great to see. And hopefully we'll be doing some more events between now and our next meeting in January, where we hope more people will have an opportunity to hear about the presentation and join us then. And then, so it looks like it's a real mix. We have some folks who are very familiar, and then I think a lot of folks who kind of probably have heard about geothermal generally, but network geothermal is its own thing. And then some folks who are not familiar at all. So not to worry, we'll start at square one and kind of give you the 101 on geothermal as we go through the presentation. Okay, let's talk about context. So this study and Buro Happold's work with Somerville is funded as part of a Kickstart Mass grant program by an organization called HEAT, Home Energy Efficiency Team, which has been engaged in our communities around the gas to geo, that is converting gas infrastructure into geothermal infrastructure, and that policy question for years now. In addition to some of their work looking at underground pipe methane emissions, and a whole variety of other energy efficiency initiatives that they've had over the years. So this study is in the context of that, along with many other communities around the state that are looking at this in their area. And so we are part of that initiative. And of course, being Somerville, we want to be leading as much as possible along with our other peer communities. So I would invite you to visit their website, the Gas to Geo Transition. Again, not to worry, we'll send out these links after the meeting, so you don't have to write it all down now. But if you go to that website, you're going to see a real, just a encyclopedia of information about geothermal, its context within Massachusetts, and work that's already happening in Framingham and Lowell and communities across the Commonwealth. I also just wanted to point out this map that is a representation of folks in our area who have signed up, expressing their interest in the gas to geo transition, expressing their interest in network geothermal as a concept for their home and their neighborhood. And if you go to that HEAT gas to geo website and scroll down towards the bottom, you're going to see a link, I think, that says, I'm interested in this. And I invite you, if you're interested, to sign up and add your voice to this larger initiative. So moving on, this is part of Climate Forward. And I hope if one takeaway from this meeting is that folks on this call take advantage and go to somervillema.gov/climateforward and look at our comprehensive plan to address climate change in Somerville. We, the mayor, the city council, have made the commitment to become carbon net negative by the year 2050. And we've set interim targets along that path starting in 2030. And in order to achieve that basic end of reducing our carbon emissions, we have 77 actions that are in that plan. And so you'll see a very comprehensive strategies that we are working on as we speak to meet our climate goals. And it is not just carbon emissions. We're also looking at making a more resilient community. Geothermal is part of that end, and also creating good paying jobs and better infrastructure for our community here in Somerville is all part of this initiative. And I think let's go ahead to the next slide. When we talk about climate change, it's not just CO2 in the air. Climate change, I think we should consider as an impact to our public health and our community. And it's not just the emissions that are pouring out of the tailpipes off of I-93 as they cross across our city, but also the effects of weather, of increased heat, island effect. Well, you all feel it every year, and I think it's becoming more and more evident all the time that climate change and its effects are really affecting us all here in the community. If we go on to the next slide, I think you'll see this is just one element of that impact. This is a map, a projection of flooding in 2070, and you'll see large swaths of our community will, if the projections hold, will be subject to extensive flooding. This is just one of many climate-related impacts that Somerville will see, along with many other communities. So Climate Forward, in addition to its action steps of reducing emissions and creating a more resilient community, includes looking at mitigation for things like flooding, heat island, and all the other consequences of this problem that we all face. So I don't want to leave us all just as doom and gloom. There are things we can be doing now if we want to move on to the next slide. And point out that this is just one thing here at the website somervillema.gov, R2NZ, which stands for Road to Net Zero. And on that website, you're going to see many, many activities. These are just two of them that you, as a renter or as a homeowner here in Somerville, can take now to reduce your own carbon emissions, reduce your building's carbon emissions, among other things. In addition to things like undergoing retrofits, which I'm going to talk about in a sec, there's things like signing up for the 100% renewable option in our community choice electricity program. That's a step folks can take right now to make themselves carbon neutral in their electrical consumption by offsetting it through renewable energy. And then in addition to things like replacing appliances, replacing heating and cooling equipment, water heaters, et cetera, insulating, adding solar PV. There's a whole panoply of things that we can do. And I think if there's any one takeaway, it's to visit this site among many of Somerville's programs to help you make choices that will help decarbonize your own life and your own building. And one of the major initiatives to that effort is I want to introduce Shannon Taylor. She is our new energy advisor. And her role really is to be that link between members of the public, such as yourselves, and all these programs, incentives, and opportunities that are available. We understand it can be a complicated process. It can be a lot of looking at contractor quotes and looking at the home energy assessment results and considering, well, geez, I want to replace my roof in 3 years. What should I be doing now? You know, there's a lot of decisions and a lot of work that goes into retrofitting your home and making it more climate friendly. And Shannon is here to help. So we'll be starting an initiative to be advertising her services more in the coming new year. Coinciding with the new mass save cycle of energy efficiency incentives. And I'll just say as a plug, 2025, you're going to see some of the highest incentives yet for heat pumps. And then the other side of that is that's going to start to trail off in 2026 and 2027. So the time to act is now, and Shannon is here to help. So. And again, not to worry, we'll be sharing all these links again at the end of the presentation and after. So that being said, with the things you can do now, I do want to now turn to Alex and Buro Happold to talk about network geothermal. What is this technology? What does it look like? And how it could work here in Somerville. So go ahead,
Great.
Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Hi, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Alex Nukovich. I'm here with Buro Happold to talk to you about some of the work that we've been doing over the last 6-7 months now with the city of Somerville, looking at demonstrating how we can do this gas to geo transition in the city. So Naomi, if you move forward a slide. First, kind of want to set the stage, building upon what a lot of Garrett already kind of told you about is why we're here. So fundamentally, we are here to help the city of Somerville meet its net zero climate goals. And as some of you may know, a large majority of the annual greenhouse gas emissions that Somerville deals with on an annual basis comes from our buildings. As you can see on the plot, that pie chart in the middle of your screen, the vast majority of the fuel mix that provides heating to a lot of our homes across the city of Somerville comes from natural gas and also a bit from fuel oil. But I also want to highlight some of the efforts being made by the city's community choice electricity program that's helping residents like yourselves find ways to provide your homes with clean electricity through renewable resources. And so overall, there is a need to figure out how we can electrify heating in a clean way, but there's a lot of opportunities that already exist at the city to start to help meet some of those climate goals that I talked about earlier. So Naomi, if you moved forward a slide. I want to talk about another challenge that some of you are aware of in the city of Somerville. Like I mentioned, buildings are responsible for the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions across the city. But 10% of that number I mentioned earlier actually comes from leaky natural gas pipes that sit beneath the ground right now. And these are really important because they release methane. And methane is a greenhouse gas that has a global warming potential of 80 times more than carbon dioxide. And so while there's been a good amount of work being done by the gas utilities in Somerville to start to repair some of those leaks, if you look at the map on your screen, all of those green dots you see are repaired gas leaks that have already been addressed in the city. We want to think about the ones that are still in red. Those are still ongoing open gas leaks that sit in Somerville. We want to start to think about how we can start to repair some of these leaks, but eventually think about how to phase them out in accordance with non-pipeline alternatives that Somerville could take on in the future. All right. So clearly, gas, not a really great resource for heating our homes and our other commercial buildings across the city. So let's say we replace all of our gas heating systems across the city of Somerville with electric ones, and they can vary in different kinds of efficiencies and typologies. And so what does that do to our electrical grid? So if you look at the figure on the right side of your screen, you will see what the typical demand for an office building looks like in the city of Somerville. You can see that blue line, which represents the peak cooling load in the summertime, is higher than the peak winter load, that peak heating, that red line you see on your screen. And so as more and more buildings start to electrify their heating, there is a risk that that red line you see on your screen will start to go up. And currently today, our electricity grid in Somerville is engineered to meet the loads of that blue line. If more and more buildings continue to electrify and that red line exceeds the blue line, our grid may not be able to handle all of that increased demand we may see in the winter time of the year. And so we really need an efficient technology that's capable of keeping this potential situation from happening. All right, and so there is a solution, and it is heat pumps. And a lot of you already probably know what heat pumps are. But they're a really great technology that are becoming increasingly popular to electrify heating in our homes in a very efficient manner. For those of you that do not know what heat pumps are, they essentially use electricity to take heat from some sort of a source, whether it's an air or a liquid, and they move it from one place to another. So from the outdoor air into your living room, from the ground into your home, or even from somewhere like the Mystic River, where there are heat pumps that can take thermal energy from our river and deliver it to our homes. And in fact, every single person on this call actually owns a heat pump. It is your refrigerator. We can also use those sorts of technologies for heating as well, more than just cooling. And so, like I mentioned earlier, there are a lot of different kinds of heat pumps. The typical one that you're probably aware of are the air source ones that pull heat out of the air, but there are also ones that can pull heat out of the ground. And so, Naomi, if you go to the next slide, I'll talk about some of the reasons for why we might choose an air versus a ground source heat pump. When we think about how efficient a heating or a cooling system is on our home, we basically want to look at the amount of energy that's needed to meet the temperature you want for your space. So let's say we're in a cold snap. It's pretty cold right now here in Somerville. And I want to heat my home to 68 degrees Fahrenheit, which is pretty standard for a living room for a house. An air source heat pump, if you see on the left side of your screen, will essentially need to take 0-degree air or whatever temperature it is outside and bring that outdoor air temperature to 68 degrees, whereas a ground source heat pump would instead take temperature from the ground, which is pretty consistently 55 degrees throughout the year, and instead bring that to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. And so you can see it's probably a lot easier to step up 13 degrees from the ground than it is 68 degrees from the outside. And the same thing happens in the summertime as well. Let's say it's the peak summer day in July and I want to cool my home to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I can either go from 55 degrees in the ground or I can go from 100 degrees outside. And so because there is a constant ground temperature that is pretty consistent throughout the year, it makes these systems a lot more efficient than the air source ones. And so when you look at the chart on the lower right of your screen, you see that ground source heat pump systems are some of the most efficient HVAC systems on the market today. But there is a way to further build on the efficiency of these systems. And that's why we're here today. So if Naomi, you'd go forward one slide. I will introduce networked geothermal. Thank you. So essentially, networked geothermal takes that concept of a single building's ground source heat pump, and it just scales it up to encompass an entire neighborhood. It makes it a larger and more resilient thermal energy system that can eventually replace the natural gas pipes in our ground. As we know, Somerville is an incredibly dense city, and actually that is where something like network geothermal thrives. Essentially, we can deliver heating and cooling energy to a lot of buildings with a small amount of pipe work in the ground, at least compared to a typical natural gas system. And that can help us provide more local, more affordable, and non-combusting heating and cooling energy for our homes and our businesses across the city. And if you step forward one slide, Naomi, I'll talk about what this means for you, all of everyone here tonight on the call. So first, we need to gather that geothermal energy. And the way we do this is through a network of pipes. So the first thing we'll do is we'll dig a series of boreholes. They're essentially 4-inch diameter holes, about 500 to 1,000 feet deep into the ground. And in those holes, we will pipe around essentially water into the ground. And that water will exchange thermal energy with the ground below to get that 55-degree temperature that I was talking about earlier. Those pipes of 55-degree water will then move in the streets the same way your gas utility works, your water utility, your sewer, etc. works. And that will eventually reach your home, your apartment, your office building, etc. Every building that sits on the network will need a ground source heat pump. There is a chance your building might need some sort of a retrofit to make your home or your apartment compatible with the heat pump. But essentially that heat pump will then take that 55-degree water and step it up to whatever temperature that you are putting in your thermostat, in your living room, in your bedroom, in your kitchen, etc. And how do you pay for this? Pretty similar to how other ways you might pay for your utilities. Essentially, you'll be charged for the amount of heating and cooling you might be using from the network throughout the year. But like I mentioned, it's an incredibly efficient system when we compare it to anything else on the market today. And Naomi, if you step forward, I'll talk about some of the other really cool benefits of something like a network geothermal system. So in addition to exchanging thermal energy with the ground, one of the things that makes these systems so efficient is the ability for buildings to be able to share their thermal energy. And so let's say that your neighborhood has a large office building in it down the street. And despite it being pretty chilly outside, it is quite likely that your office building is still rejecting heat out into the world outside of it. But rather than just wasting that heat to the external environment, we can instead capture that heat, put it into our network, and deliver that heat to your home to be able to heat it efficiently. And we can do the same thing with other sorts of large waste heat sources, like wastewater treatment plants, breweries, data centers, even grocery stores. And so as you start to look around you in the city of Somerville, there's a lot of really cool opportunities to share heat and cooling between buildings throughout the year. Thanks, Naomi. And another really great benefit of these types of systems is the ability to provide thermal energy storage throughout the year. So let's say, certainly not tonight, but let's say we're in the middle of the summer and all of our buildings are rejecting heat. They have to cool themselves. Naomi, if you click once, perfect, thank you very much. All of the heat that we have rejected into the ground during the summertime, we can then extract later in the wintertime, i.e. right now, to heat our buildings when we actually need it throughout the year. And so this ability to reject heat in the summer and bring it out in the winter allows us to seasonally balance the network and allows the network to perform for a longer period of time in an efficient way. And I will talk to some other kind of non-energy benefits as well, because those are also really important to why we're here talking about network geothermal. Naomi, if you click once, thank you. Kind of a dramatic thing, but really important. One of the great benefits of network geothermal is that it's incredibly safe. Rather than having combusting gas running through all of our buildings across the city, we're dealing with water. That potentially a mix of a small amount of antifreeze solution, but there are no risk of hazardous leaks or explosions like the picture you see on your screen, which was in Massachusetts. If you step forward one more, Naomi, access to cooling. I Walking around the city of Somerville, some of you have window AC units, some of you might have central cooling. There's also some of you that do not have cooling at all throughout the year. And as Garrett alluded to earlier, the summers are only going to continue to get hotter and the winters are only going to continue to get colder. One of the really great things about network geothermal systems is that the heat pump will give you access to cooling in the summertime, which is really important as the summers get hotter and longer. Another really great benefit is lower utility bills. So with gas, typically in Somerville, a gas bill will be roughly 50% of the utility cost you pay every single month. With a geothermal system, you're not paying for gas, you're paying for more electricity, but it's a really efficient system. And so that bill is not going to be as high as it once was before. Another great benefit, emissions and air quality. So because we are running these systems on electricity and the exchange of energy with the ground or other buildings around you, as the grid continues to get cleaner and cleaner in the state of Massachusetts, the emissions as a result for your heating system will only continue to improve over time. And eventually they will fall to zero. Another one is equity. So the infrastructure that would get installed through a network geothermal system would cover an entire neighborhood at a single time. And so everyone on that network, which can scale and grow over time, will produce cleaner indoor air, better safety, lower bills, regardless of your income level. And lastly, one more thing that's also incredibly important is workforce development. So the pipes of water essentially being deployed through a network geothermal system are the exact same types as what currently exists for gas. And so the workers that currently run the gas network could easily retrain to be able to run a geothermal network. And also I want to add the technology used for drilling geothermal energy, those boreholes into the ground, build upon techniques that already exist in this type of industry, just not as deep and not as polluting. And so from a workforce development perspective, there is a lot of opportunity there as well. Naomi, if you step forward, I'll talk about a couple examples and case studies, one of which is actually quite close to where everyone is right now. That's in Framingham, Massachusetts. So Eversource actually just turned on their first utility-owned network geothermal system in the state of Massachusetts. Within Framingham, there are about 140 customers, a blend of residential and commercial customers that had their HVAC systems upgraded and their buildings weatherized to be able to take on this new network geothermal system. And the reception of the network has been so positive, they're actually already working on design for an extension loop to continue building and adding on more and more buildings to that network, making it even more resilient over time. Another example I want to highlight is actually down in Austin, Texas, in a neighborhood called Whisper Valley. And this network is even larger. There's about 7,500, single family and multifamily homes on this network geothermal system, in addition to a lot of other commercial buildings across the neighborhood. And the reason why I want to highlight this one is if you all read the news back in the winter of 2021, I believe it was February of that year, there was a massive cold snap that hit Austin, Texas. And you may have read about pipes freezing over, people not being able to heat their homes, people couldn't get clean water. One of the really great things about the network geothermal system is that it continued to operate despite the extreme cold temperatures because they were able to continue running heat exchange with the ground despite the electricity being out. And so that just really highlights some of the resilient benefits of having a network geothermal system in your neighborhood. Moving forward, clearly we're pretty excited about this technology. The city of Somerville is as well. So we basically have been working with the city to understand where we could potentially put a pilot demonstration project, highlighting how and how well this technology can work in the city. Most of the city is actually a really viable candidate for a demonstration project for network geothermal. But we wanted to put in place some key criteria, both from a technical and a planning perspective, to help narrow down our decision-making process. And so it's clearly a long list you're seeing on your screen, but I'll highlight a few of them. We want to look for neighborhoods that have a diverse type of buildings to be able to balance the heating and cooling use those buildings need throughout the year. We're looking for waste heat sources or other thermal resources. So we're looking at the Mystic River, we're looking at data centers, ice rinks, breweries, wastewater treatment facilities. And we're also looking for really dense areas in Somerville. Like I said earlier, one of the great benefits of network geothermal is that it likes having a dense network of buildings, because the more buildings you can put on the network, the more thermal energy you can deliver with less pipe infrastructure. And then from a planning perspective, there's also a lot of other considerations we think about. We need space to dig bore fields, which do get covered up and you can use it after the holes are dug. We need to think about what already sits in the streets of Somerville. Can we coordinate this work with paving or other ongoing utility work? Are there neighborhoods in the city with electricity or gas constraints? And are there opportunities to advance energy equity within the city? Thinking about things like pollution or energy burden or access to cooling. So like I said, a lot of really great opportunities across the city. And this was just some guidelines to help us narrow down where do we do this first potential project for Network Geo. And Naomi, if you step forward and then click once, thank you. So basically, we took all those criteria I just alluded to on the prior slide. We dumped them all into GIS, essentially a mapping software. And we overlaid some opportunities to capture waste heat, all of those different icons on your screen. And there were three main areas that emerged as ones that fit our criteria the best. And so as you'll see on the following slides, I'll highlight each of those three sites. And what's great about them is that they represent three very unique types of network geothermal systems that really highlight all the opportunity there is for this technology across the city. So Naomi, if you step forward, I'll talk about the first site, and that's in Central Hill. So right by City Hall, right by Somerville High School, the public library. I first want to highlight the network diagram. So that kind of red line diagram and the buildings highlighted on your screen are just for illustrative purposes right now. No buildings have been selected for any sort of pilot demonstration project, but just to highlight what a potential network might look like for the city of Somerville. And so what's really cool about this neighborhood, what we really liked about it, was the opportunity to showcase network geothermal using a combination of municipal and school buildings. So like I said, we've got City Hall, we've got Somerville High School, the public library, YMCA is here. There's a lot of residential buildings in the area that could benefit from a geothermal system. And so this was the first site we looked at. Naomi, if you step forward another slide. We move into the 10 Hills neighborhood. So sitting kind of further north in Somerville, right up against the Mystic River. A lot of really cool opportunities here. Again, the diagram being for illustrative purposes only, buildings have not been finalized. But it's an opportunity to provide network geothermal to the Somerville Housing Authority and the tenants that currently live there, and also to figure out how we could integrate the Mystic River into a thermal energy network. We've also been looking at what are some of the infrastructure constraints that might impact where a network could be deployed. And actually, there is an ability for us to be able to go under the Northern Expressway to connect the 10 Hills neighborhood and the Somerville Housing Authority on either side of that freeway. And then Naomi, if you step forward one more slide, I'll highlight the last site. And this is Central Somerville Avenue. And what we liked about this site actually was the opportunity to integrate a lot of waste heat sources into the network. So on the lower left side of your screen, kind of where Conway Park is, that is Veterans Memorial Ice Rink, which gives off a pretty consistent amount of heat throughout the year. That could be utilized to heat a lot of homes nearby in the Central Somerville neighborhood. In addition to that, there is Aeronaut Brewing Company. There's a lot of other manufacturing facilities in the area, and also a lot of homes that could benefit from utilizing some of that wasted heat and additional geothermal energy as well. So again, these are three examples of the types of networks we could think about deploying as part of a pilot demonstration project in Somerville. I believe some of you may have received or will be receiving postcards pretty soon in the mail, potentially demonstrating whether or not you have interest in participating in a project like this. Garrett will talk more about this in just a second, but as a part of getting those postcards in the mail, any help you could provide us with our analysis through responding to that postcard would be incredibly helpful. So I'll hand it back to Garrett and we'll do some Q&A. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thanks, Alex. So that was a quick tour of the technology and the kind of study that we're undergoing here. So just to put some context around this, what Buro Happold is doing is a feasibility study of these three sites. And the feasibility kind of looks at the economic analysis, the technical, kind of where bore fields could theoretically go, what the pipe lengths would be. And we're going to use these as representative projects that could advance in the future into a design and an implementation, and also could go into the portfolio of all the other communities that are in the HEAT Kickstart Mass grants that are doing feasibility studies in their own communities. So this work is doing is two things for us. So you saw the three maps. We're going to put up a quick poll about whether or not you live in one of those areas. And again, just to clarify, the maps that you saw show pipe routing and show houses that are highlighted. It's not exactly what even the theoretical study would encompass, but it's kind of, think of it as kind of the general neighborhood. And like Alex alluded to earlier, what we're doing now, and I think what went out in the mail today, so folks should start receiving in the next day or two, is we generated a list of the houses that live that are in these various study areas. And so they ask from us is, if you receive this postcard, that means we could use your help with the study. And when it'll ask you to go back to that same web link that we had before, the somervillema.gov/geothermal. And if you fill that out again, as if you were signing up for for one of these webinars, there's a question that says, did you receive a postcard? And if you hit yes, it's going to prompt you with some more questions where you can talk about what your heating and cooling systems is, things about your building. And then there's also an opportunity for folks to share their utility account information that with us in the city privately, that we would then aggregate into a larger data from the utilities. And that's to help us drill down a little bit on actual energy consumption in these neighborhoods, and could help make that survey a little more accurate. So looks like probably most folks are not in those communities, or not in those study areas, which kind of makes sense, because we just are sending out the mailers now. And so our hope is the January meeting will have many of those folks who did get those mailers come and help us work through the study. So I think most folks have filled out the poll. I think now's the time for questions. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And again, the protocol, and I see there's a couple of folks who have already raised their hands. Go ahead and do that, and we will prompt you to unmute yourself. And I'm just going to go in the order received. I think it's at least in the order received. And it looks like Ed Wool is up first. So Ed, I think you should be able to unmute yourself now. So go ahead.
Thank you. Have I unmuted myself now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
Okay,
hear you
great.
just fine.
Thanks very much. Great presentation. Thank you very much. Learned a lot from it, and it's nice to see you know so much about our city. I got a couple of questions. We have a new school being built or rehabbed. Would one of these, I've got a three-part question. Would one of these systems apply to the new school and all its parts as a separate geothermal microdistrict for that school and maybe some of the surrounding areas? The second is, assuming that a geothermal system is not perfect for a lot of it, for some areas, would the city promote using air source heat pumps in those areas at the same time they're promoting geothermal? And then of the three areas that you've designated, 1, 2, and 3, are any of those concentrated EJ areas?
Okay, let's see if I can do all three. I will try. So Winter Hill, I don't want to get ahead of that design process. I know that committee is just started meeting, and to say, geothermal as a concept can work in a lot of different places, including at a school. There's several schools in Cambridge that have geothermal systems. So that's certainly, on the table as a design option. Again, just to put the context around the studies, we needed to pick areas for the purposes of the study. We had to kind of define the idea is kind of defining, I believe like about a 500-ton geothermal system was kind of our baseline. And so these areas are built around that concept. And just because Winter Hill is not on this map doesn't mean that it's being, ignored as a geothermal possibility. Let's see. The other question was about air source heat pumps. Yeah, I do want to reiterate, this is a feasibility study looking at technical and financial considerations for, implementation. Certainly it's something we want to do. But there isn't a straight line from these feasibility studies into a design and construction project that's happening in the next year or 2 years or 3 years, right? We hope folks are taking the steps now to weatherize their home, install heat pumps where appropriate, and do all the things one can do to decarbonize their home. And again, I'm going to plug Shannon Taylor again as a new resource that's available to the community. And Ed, I'm sorry, I think I lost the third question. Forgot.
Third question is, are any of the 3 areas you've designated neighborhoods have
Oh,
an
yes.
community? And then what
Yeah.
the cap cost is that each home would have and to implement one of these things, capital costs they bear.
Right. Oh, I think you added a fourth question there, but that's okay. EJ community. Yeah. So we have, I believe it's, geez, 51 EJ census blocks in Somerville. And there are several overlapping. I do want to highlight particularly 10 Hills. That is, would be intended to serve the Mystic View Apartments, which is a large affordable housing community. I believe it's the largest affordable housing community here in Somerville. So certainly that would qualify. And I guess I'm not prepared to say precisely if the Central Hill and the Central Somerville Ave would have those census blocks in them. I just don't have the information at hand. And capital cost that's going to be part of the feasibility study. And there's a wide variation in kind of what the home is now and what that would need to be put in. And maybe I'll defer to Alex and Buro Happold if you want to say a little bit about what kinds of systems go into homes at the end of these networks.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Garrett is totally on the ball. It kind of depends. The capital cost will depend on the type of heating and cooling system you already have in your home. Typically, if you have a heat pump already, if you have a furnace, basically, if you have any sort of ducted system within your home or your apartment, it makes it a lot easier to retrofit your home to be able to take on a ground source heat pump. As I said, that's kind of the main component that would need to be installed in your home to be compatible with the geothermal system. So if you don't have a ducted system, it does not mean you're not eligible to potentially participate in a system like this, but your home might just need a few more retrofits than one that does have ducting already. That's the primary thing. I know in the Framingham example I talked about earlier, Eversource did decide to include weatherization retrofits, so essentially improving the building envelope of the homes included, of the commercial buildings included in the network, just to make it that much more efficient. But yeah, it kind of varies building to building.
Thanks, Alex. Next question from Sharman.
Hi, everybody. I live in 10 Hills. In fact, my condo was right in that map. I'm also a retired civil engineer, and I have worked on 2 buildings, one in Boston, one in Cambridge, that used geothermal cooling heating techniques. But this was water source. We drilled nice deep wells and used the water to as a source for the heating and cooling. I have one technical question here is, where does the water come from? And is it in a closed loop? And
Go ahead, Alex.
and we are on the river, and that there is great open space area that would be wonderful for drilling the boreholes. And then our condo community does have ground air source heat pumps. So what needs to be changed in order to use a ground source? So my three questions.
Yeah. All right. Great questions. I'm going to see if I remember all of them. I will start with the ground versus the ground source system. It is a closed loop system that we are doing all of our techno-economic analysis around. So like I said earlier, the boreholes themselves, the number of boreholes would depend on the size of the network we were to evaluate. As Garrett was saying, we are right now evaluating 500-ton systems. So I can't actually tell you the number of boreholes we may essentially dig, but they would be in a closed loop network. The same would go for if we were to integrate into the Mystic River, it would also be a closed loop system. So there would be no exchange of fluid between the ground and the network or the river and the network. Essentially, you put in the water, and if there is a small amount of glycol, essentially antifreeze, put in the network, that is done at a single time and it is not done again. And that is essentially what keeps the system running. To address the condo air source heat pump question, that is actually a really great existing system to have to retrofit into a ground source system. Because you already have ducting running through all of the condos, essentially you would just need to replace the air source system with a ground source heat pump. And then you'd be able to take on the network geothermal system and be compatible with the network. I hope I answered all your questions.
Yeah, just building off of that, in Framingham, they did a closed loop system with a food grade glycol mix in that, and that's to prevent it freezing in the unlikely event that cold air is somehow hitting pipes that are underground. But the intent there is that even if it did spill and someone dug a hole right into the pipe 4 feet deep and somehow broke it, that it would not be a major concern, unlike natural gas, I might say. Anyway, let's moving on. Michael H.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Thanks so much. You actually already answered my question, so I just wanted to thank y'all. I learned a ton, the presentation. I super appreciate this outreach. So thanks so much.
Well, thanks, Michael. And I swear we didn't plant Michael into the group. All right. Yeah, Sarah.
Hi, thanks very much. I'm a retiree living in on Winter Hill. I'm an 1890 house with no ducts. We did install solar panels about 10 years ago, which provide all of our electricity for the year at zero cost. When I investigated the air source heat pumps a year or so ago, I was informed by the Green Energy coalition person who evaluated at my house that there would be not a great deal of energy savings for me in terms of utilizing gas, because the cost of the system was such, given all of the ductwork that was needed, that it really would not afford a great deal of cost savings. However, it would change the carbon content of the fuel that I used, because I would be able to use electricity. So can you tell me whether or not increasing solar access as an electricity source in the city would mitigate the risk of overburdening the grid in the very hot and very cold parts of the year that you mentioned, if there were more solar facilities or solar arrays available? Because currently you can only put it on your own house for your own use. You're not allowed to share the solar energy with anybody else. And we have many buildings, including schools, City Hall, and other public facilities that certainly could have solar energy systems available that could feed it into a grid that was accessible to the city. So can you compare the energy efficiency if a solar maximal optimization takes place, given the relatively high cost of geothermal systems for the average homeowner or resident?
Okay. I'm tempted just to kick it over to Alex, because I think what is involved is a lot of math in answering that question. But the truth is, there's quite a, so there's a lot of variation for any individual home, right? And what the capital cost and what the operating cost is of how many BTUs are needed to heat and cool a home. Regarding the solar, more solar in Somerville is always better, right? We'd love to see every roof in the city covered in solar. The bit about it helping offset grid constrictions, that's kind of getting into the real technical islanding interconnection rules with the utility and whether or not so there's a lot of moving pieces there that I'm not prepared to really get into because frankly it's kind of above my head mostly at the time, but I will say we are looking at the challenges of electrification and grid modernization here in Somerville. That's an active project that we actually worked with Buro Happold on as well. And we'll actually soon be issuing a report dealing with precisely that issue, the increased amount of electrical load that we're seeking for building owners to be decarbonizing and greening their heating and cooling sources, and what the challenges are for the neighborhood level grid here in Somerville. All those poles that we have, many of which are leaning and have transformers on them. So I guess I'll say stay tuned for that report, which I think can get into a little more of the detail that you're looking for. Alex, anything to add? I kind of, as the resident engineer here.
I think you hit it well, Garrett. Yeah, we did a good chunk of analysis on this exact sort of question, Sarah. Looking at, there is a challenge in upgrading a lot of the homes in Somerville to be compatible with these sorts of systems. So, hopefully the report that's being issued soon addresses a lot of that.
Actually, Sarah, my name is Jason Masters. I lead Buro Happold's energy division. So you had a question regarding adding ductwork to an air sourced system. You do have an option of a mini split system that does not require ducts in your 1890s house. So that would be a less expensive option. As far as a geothermal network that we're investigating the feasibility on, it would require a ducted system. If an organization like the utility does come in and own and operate this system, there is an opportunity that they would help out with those costs, because these are energy efficient upgrades. And there are incentives throughout the federal government through the Inflation Reduction Act that start out at a minimum of 30% of that capital cost. So that is one way of offsetting those upfront costs, to basically bring these energy efficiency improvements more in line with and more competitive to a conventional system or even an air sourced system.
Well, thanks, Jason. And I think you remind me to put another plug for Shannon, and I'll say, Sarah, that there's certainly, I think your home deserves another look. And if you're interested, I'd invite you to reach out to Shannon or ask Shannon to reach out to you, and we can she can look at the specifics of your home, options, incentives that are available. So there is always more looking to be had. Okay, I think we got a lot of questions going. Monty, I think is next.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me? Good. My questions don't spring from my residence. They spring from the fact that I'm leading an effort to persuade the congregation of the church that I belong to decarbonize the church building. And the consultants that we're working with, we have a lot of confidence in them, but what we're finding is that geothermal is, for the purposes of this church building, would be a preferable technology rather than air source heat pumps. As you can imagine, the congregation weighing all this the costs are a major factor. And what we're hearing is that the upfront costs, Jason was just referring to that, I think, upfront costs would be greater for a geothermal system than they would be for an air source heat pump system. And so I wanted to, I guess, just get a yes/no confirmation of whether that's a likely reality for us. And on the other hand, apart from the upfront costs, what we're also hearing is that the operational costs going forward, the run costs, would be significantly less. And so I'd also like to get some confirmation of that. And I'm interested in your forecasting about the incentives, but with the change in administration that's impending. Because one of the things that makes it easier to sit with the higher upfront costs would be the incentives that Jason referred to. We were hearing 40% in our case of upfront costs. Makes that an easier pill to swallow, and that would, of course, enable us to take advantage of the lower running costs. So what do you think about is the future for the incentives?
You want me to take this one?
Yeah, Jason, go for it.
Well, the future.
So
My crystal ball is pretty cloudy these days.
Yeah. So while the administration is changing in the White House, World Resources Institute is actually coming out with an actual outlook, a Republican outlook of which incentives are going to be retained and how much of them will be retained or possibly even increased. And on that list right now is geothermal. Now, whether that includes shallow geothermal, which is what we're doing a feasibility study for now, or if it just includes deep geothermal that has not been identified in the current publication. To address your other comment, geothermal is on average about 2 to 2.3 or 2.4 times as expensive as installing an air-sourced heat pump system without ductwork. Now, the efficiency of a ground source system or a geothermal system will in fact become more efficient over the lifetime of the asset itself. Whereas air-sourced heat pumps may last, they have a nameplate capacity anywhere between 20 to 25 years. A ground-sourced heat pump system will last about 5 to 10 years more than that, but the efficiency effect that you'll be gaining off a ground source system will surpass the efficiency of the air source system somewhere between 10 to 15 years down the road, depending on how energy costs change. Since Eversource is actually implementing a new rate case that makes geothermal even that much more attractive as time goes by.
And Monty, I'm glad your congregation is looking into geothermal as a concept, and I don't want to gloss over it. It is no small thing to drill a 500-foot well, and that's a shallow well, is a 500-foot in the geothermal world. And Somerville, we're small, right? My backyard is 15 by 15 feet here in Somerville, and the idea of me getting in a drill rig into my 10-foot wide driveway and doing a hole for my house, that's not feasible, right? And so, one of the beauties of network geothermal is undertaking that major infrastructure project. And I do want to emphasize major infrastructure project. We're talking about, these would be drilling dozens or hundreds of holes, digging up, and digging up streets and putting in pipes. And I think we've all witness what that looks like in our community. So the idea around network geothermal is to aggregate that infrastructure into one place and then distribute it out. So we're not left with the situation of every homeowner out for themselves or every building owner out for themselves trying to figure out how to put a hole or two in their backyard or in their parking lot or wherever. So that is the notion of network geothermal. Is it is a utility replacement, a utility scale infrastructure. Okay, moving on. I think we have Joshua Goldman next. Go ahead, Josh.
Hi, this is probably for Shannon. We had Mass Save do an energy audit for this, our second one, about more than 5 years ago, and basically there wasn't much that they could do. Has anything changed that we should get another one done?
I would say it is worth doing another one. You can do one every 3 years. And yes, there have been changes to the incentive programs during that time. It's hard to say more without knowing the specifics, but yes, it would be worth doing another one.
And I will say Shannon can help you with that. So we're going to show her a link, and we'll be sending out her contact information after the meeting. And I hope she gets lots of calls over the next few days from people who are interested in undertaking retrofits. I apologize, Rowena. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Great. Is the siting process for the trial run closed, or are you still looking at other sites? And if you're looking at other sites, how can we contact you about potential ones?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we needed to put bounds around the feasibility study. And so these three sites are where we are looking, and where, you know, our ask for help for information about these sites is so short answer is these are the three sites we'll be looking at for the purposes of this study. But, you know, Somerville is, you know, I think I said this to Buro Happold the other day, is everything about these sites, you know, in terms of access to bedrock, density of buildings and the like, can be repeated. I mean, you know, Somerville neighborhoods are all kind of look like these in a lot of ways, right? We have dense, close houses everywhere. And so, you know, just because we're looking at these three sites doesn't mean that we would never look at any other place in Somerville, or that even, you know, that one of these three sites would necessarily be, you know, the pilot project. It's just we needed to kind of put bounds around the places that we were looking for the purposes of this feasibility study.
Okay. And if we contact Shannon about potential upgrades to larger communities, talking about apartment buildings, could the recommendations include a geothermal project based on how many people live in a building?
Well, not, I see. Geothermal is an incentive. They do, Mass Save does have incentives for geothermal heat pumps, just like they have for air source heat pumps. So certainly on the table. And I guess I'll just say, you know, I hope you get in touch with Shannon soon so we can talk about specifics. All right, moving on to Matt B. Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thanks for the presentation. Love it. Can't wait to have network geothermal in Somerville. I had sort of a silly question. If we're putting the holes in the ground and we're running pipes to people's houses of slightly warm water, could we run some pipes under the sidewalk so we never have to shovel snow again?
I'll kick it to Alex. I will say snow melt is it's a lot of heat to melt the snow. Go ahead, Alex. Any other engineering specifics?
It is technically feasible. Yes, you can do it. Be kind of like a radiant heating sort of thing you might have on the floors in your home. Might be expensive to do, as Garrett was alluding to, but technically, yes, you could do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say in a former life, I did capital construction projects for housing authorities, and I will say we did do a couple of snow melt systems here and there at elderly buildings, but that was like 50 square feet, at the entrance for those folks, because it is a lot of heat that goes out, because you're just trying to heat. The ground wants to be 55 degrees, so trying to heat it, and then the air is pushing against that in the snow. So it's a lot of energy that goes into those. Sorry. Anyway, moving on. Josh, you want to go ahead?
Hi, I was wondering if the city had any plans to use network geothermal in its larger redevelopments like Brick Bottom or Inner Belt or the Assembly Square or extensions. Because if there needs to be a lot of digging and drilling, areas that are already being redeveloped seem like a prime candidate for that.
So certainly, yeah, like I said before, network geothermal can go into a lot of places, and a mix of building types, including those large office buildings or those large residential buildings, helps. I guess I would point out, we're looking at I sent to Buro Happold today the 5-year sidewalk and street reconstruction plan to kind of do some thinking around how that would tie into future systems. So I don't want to preclude any particular area as a possibility. Moving on, John Allen Broderick. Unmute yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for this presentation. I've learned quite a bit so far. Just, quickly, when you talk 500 tons, okay, that's refrigeration tons that you refer to, right? The small systems. I guess I'll direct this to Alex. You mentioned 500 ton systems as pilot systems. All right, a little thumbnail math. That tells me that's about 100, the equivalent of about 100 two-family homes, more or less, or well, 100 units.
Roughly.
Okay, so that would provide heating and cooling.
Yeah.
Okay, I just trying to get my mind around the numbers.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple things. First of all, Garrett, you may be familiar with my company. I work for a company called Vicinity Energy. It was the plant I work in was originally Cambridge Electric Light in Kendall Square. And so we are in the middle of a project now that's this dovetails into the district heat pump system. We're installing a large, really large industrial scale heat pump that's going to use the Charles River as its heat source. And it's going to supply ultimately low pressure steam, or actually high pressure steam, to the Boston and Cambridge district heating system. So I don't know, are you familiar with that at all?
I am. Yeah, no, I have been tracking that a bit. How about can we do this? Can you send me an email and we can have this conversation offline? Because I would love to learn, get more into the specifics of the project. I mean, it's really cool.
Yeah. So yeah, Buro Happold would like to find out more about it too.
So yeah, so my email will be out, along with a lot of other links and contacts after the meeting. So I hope we can connect. Moving on, Ben.
Hi. So I live in 10 Hills, but a little bit outside of what I saw on that map. So, firstly, I'm wondering, whether there's a potential of like extending it to cover, 10 Hills is a pretty small neighborhood, the whole thing. It's a shame to just get that corner. But then related to that, I know that coming up, starting in hopefully 2026, there's going to be a bunch of digging over there already for the CSO like sewer separation project. So I'm wondering if like you've thought at all about like coordinating work with that, where there's already going to be digging, whether that like helps at all.
Yeah. At the risk of sounding like a broken record, that these are feasibility studies. So, again, just because your home isn't, and Ben, you might actually receive a postcard anyway, because we we drew slightly larger bounds around the mailers that we're sending out for each one of these. So you still might be in the study area, but again, whether or not your house shows up on these maps or you get a postcard doesn't, that's not like we needed to put bounds around the studies for the purposes of penciling out the technology and the economics of it. So don't consider yourself excluded. I guess is
Yeah,
my short answer.
On the first map, that was the overview. I was in the little red outline there, but then not on the detailed. So
yeah, and again, the detail was the mailers will actually be a little bit bigger than what so again, I don't know your house, but you might still get a mailer.
Yeah. And then
Alex,
to address your second question, Ben, yes, one of the kind of selection criteria we were thinking about is actually thinking about how we can coordinate things like the CSO with the network geothermal project, because rather than having to dig up a street twice to do multiple utility projects, why not just do it once in a coordinated fashion? It also saves money too. So we love saving money. So yeah, that is something we definitely looked at.
All right. Ara, sorry if I mispronounced your name.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's Ara, and thank you so much for this presentation. I'm really excited. Garrett, as you said, individual geothermal is really hard to do in this very, very tightly packed city. I've tried many times. I have 1 million questions, but I'll try to reduce it to 3. The first is about cost efficiency. This doesn't really work if you're also running a gas system at the same time. So I'm curious how this assessment is looking at total electrification. Will the systems that you're looking at include water heating as well as space conditioning? Are you thinking about other electrification, cooking, clothes drying, et cetera? Second question, is this coordinated with the utilities? I know that the Central Avenue area was a front runner for the Eversource pilot, and I'm curious how your work has kind of evolved to that project area. And then I was curious about the Mystic River and also the Charles River project that people mentioned. I thought that open water geothermal systems were not very popular these days because of environmental concerns. So I'm just curious how that thinking has evolved. And thank you so much.
Sure. I will say we are coordinating with the utilities. They're obviously Eversource, which is a major supplier here in Somerville, did the pilot in Framingham. We've taken several tours with them. The mayor was at a tour just the other week, and we are talking with them about this. We want to be at the front of the line for whatever their next pilot project is. So certainly that is coordination that we're doing. And Alex, do you want to speak a little bit about the technical piece within a house, and then also the closed loop systems in the river?
Yes. Eric, can you remind me of I have your question in my head about the Mystic and the Charles Rivers. Can you remind me of the in-house one? Apologies.
Sure. It was about the idea that you can't really run a gas system and a network geothermal and have it be cost efficient. So how are you thinking about that?
Thank you for reminding me. Yes, the idea eventually is to get completely off of the gas system because, like you said, it's not really cost effective to have all these sorts of different systems in your home. So eventually, yes, we would need to replace potentially your stove with an electric stove. The systems that we're evaluating will evaluate hot water heating within the homes or the commercial buildings. The clothes dryers would need to be converted eventually over to electricity, so that the only things that you are using to heat your home are electricity and then the geothermal network in and of itself. Jason actually has a pretty significant background in water protection and conservation. Jason, do you want to talk about kind of the evolution in thought around the closed loop water exchange systems?
Sure. So if Mystic River was to be used as a thermal reservoir for this geothermal district, then it would be on a closed loop system. So there would be no open exchange with the water. This way, the the equipment that would be in the Mystic River would act just like a radiator would. So since it's a water barrier, water contact, it actually has better heat transfer capabilities and a more efficient thermal coefficient.
Great,
the way
thank you
I've
so much.
the way I've seen it described, it's like a giant like waffle coil that, you know, hundreds of feet long and many loops, and then you put it on the river and then you sink it to the bottom, and then it sits there, you know, and then there's the fluid is flowing through it. Let's see, I think we're running up on time, so we probably only have one or two more questions, but Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah, I have an 1870 house that I have fitted with air heat pump and split systems. And you talk about needing ducts for geothermal heat, but wouldn't it work with my mini splits?
Yeah, it can. I mean, it depends. Every system's different, but yes, it can. But the typical retrofit in a lot of cases for these geothermal is one geothermal heat pump, like that would go where your furnace would be, and then the ducts are distributing out the hot. But there are systems that can fit in with mini splits.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, there's no furnace anymore in my house, and the radiators are gone, and you know that's the total heating system. And I just assumed you could swap out the air heat pump for the water heat pump, and if that's not right, I'm interested to hear about it.
Yeah, well, we thank you for taking the step of what you've done so far. So we appreciate that. Okay, I think Paul.
Hi, I'm Paul. This is very exciting. I work for Dandelion Energy at Greentown Labs, which is part of the Summer Nova complex near the Memorial Ice Rink. So we build retrofit geothermal heat pumps, and I'd be interested to see how this expansion plays out and whether we can connect our units to your network to protect things.
Great, well, thank you. Yeah, so that is one of our study areas. And I think last question, Rowena? Or did you just have your hand up from before?
So once you do the feasibility studies, is the goal to get a sort of analysis of how big does the network have to be for a geothermal to be cost effective? Or what are the next steps for Somerville to increase the amount of geothermal networks used within the city?
Yeah, well, thanks. So that leads me right into my next slide, which is called next steps. The feasibility study is going to look at the economics and technical feasibility of these three sites, and then we're going to go into our next step of advocating with utility and seeking grant opportunities and looking at ways we can move one of these sites or another area in Somerville forward to next step in the process. So in the meantime, next steps here in the here and now. If you're in a study area, you're going to receive, or hopefully you're going to receive in the mail, a postcard that invites you to go back to the somervillema.gov geothermal site, which is that form that you all filled out to join this meeting. And there's one of those questions. If you got a mailer, you hit yes, and then it's going to ask you some questions about your building. And if you would like, you could fill that out. And again, with the utility account information would be privately shared with the utility and aggregated as a way of looking at actual usage. So that's one step. You can keep informed about this and all of our other initiatives. It's part of Climate Forward, going to Sustainaville and signing up for the newsletter. Please help us by spreading the word about the next meeting. And also, there's work to be done in many homes to weatherize and decarbonize now. So visit somervillema.gov/scene for Somerville Energy Efficiency Now, where you're going to see information about Shannon's energy advisor work and many, many other steps and programs that you can take. So I'd invite you all to go to that site at your leisure. And then lastly, learn more about geothermal generally and HEAT's work. Go to that heat.org/whatisgas2geo. And if you scroll to the bottom, there's a link where it says I am interested or I want geo in my neighborhood, and you can click that and put your name in and get added to the growing list of people who are advocating for it in their community. And again, not to worry, we'll be sending out a thank you email after the meeting. We're recording this meeting, and we'll be giving you all these links as well. So look for that in your inbox soon. And again, thank you all for attending. And we hope to be in touch with you soon. Thank you all.